guys for joining us this evening. It's a special edition of the Blockchain Breakfast Club, co-hosted by iAngels, iCapital, eToro, and Blockland this evening. So we have very special guests with us tonight, and we're very eager to kind of hear from the experts. For those of us who are joining us for the first time, the Blockchain Breakfast Club is a monthly gathering where we're discussing each month a different project, different companies, and hosting kind of like the best and brightest minds in blockchain innovation in Israel. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our esteemed panelists. With us today, I'll go by that order. Bernie Moreno, serial entrepreneur and investor. Bernie has actually flown in to join us from Cleveland, Ohio. He has been described as the high-octane luxury car dealer and influential Cleveland civic leader who wants to make Northeast Ohio a national epicenter of all things blockchain. So Bernie and scores of other local leaders have come together to create Blockland, which we'll hear a little bit more about in a few seconds. And they're going to transform Cleveland into an epicenter of blockchain, innovation, technology, education, research, training, and entrepreneurship. With us today, we also have Dr. Elad Granot, co-chair of the Entrepreneurial Environment Node in the Blockland Initiative. He's the Dean of the Deutsch College of Business and Economics at Ashley University. Dr. Granot serves on several boards, has advised numerous tech startups, and is the founder and managing member of a boutique VC firm. We have Yoni Assia, CEO of eToro. eToro has been named one of the most influential fintech companies in the world. They are a unicorn coming out of Israel and a very strong player in the blockchain ecosystem. So we'll hear a little bit more about that in a sec. Asaf Shulman, CEO of CoinMama, is an entrepreneur who've had various roles in startups in Israel and Australia over the last 20 years. In his last role, he was VP Marketing at Checkmarx, one of Israel's fastest growing cybersecurity companies, and has been involved in cryptocurrency since 2013 and bringing the first Bitcoin ATM to Israel. Lior Lamesh, CEO of Puzzle, as a cybersecurity expert, worked in the Prime Minister's office. Prior to that, worked as an embedded software engineer at Kaggle Digital Systems, acquired by Mellanox, served as a lieutenant in the Israeli Air Force, and holds an MBA and bachelor's degree in computer science from the Bar Ilan University. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I would like to take a few minutes for Bernie to share with us a deck that he has prepared to share a little bit more about the vision and inspiration to found Blockland and to really research blockchain ecosystems around the world and understand how Cleveland can become a blockchain innovation center. So with that, yes.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Because well, before we start the presentation, just again, the one thing I'd say is thank you to iAngels, to my new Jewish godmother, Lila, out there somewhere. There she is. You know, I just want to start my presentation by saying one thing to all of you here. You obviously all live here. You work here. A lot of you are probably born and raised here. And as an outsider, somebody coming from Cleveland, Ohio, you have an amazing city, an amazing ecosystem you should be really proud of. So really, really, really impressive. I think my IQ's gone up like 20 points just today, right? So it did start a little base, I know what you're saying. But anyway, no, really, really cool. Closer? Okay, there you go. All right, perfect. So let me just talk to you about Blockland real quick. The idea is Cleveland. A lot of you may not know about Cleveland, Ohio. So Cleveland is, there you go, I got rid of my panelist. I got rid of the panel.
I'm going to stay, guys.
Perfect. So Cleveland, Ohio, about 100 years ago, was actually the wealthiest city in the United States, something that you may not know. John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, all that started in Cleveland. Big, huge manufacturing town. but obviously focused solely on manufacturing for a long time. Tires, plastics, a lot of auto parts came there. So what this effort's about is how do we transition Cleveland's economy from manufacturing to technology, much like what you've done here in Tel Aviv. Because I would think Tel Aviv 10 years ago is nothing like what Tel Aviv is today. Maybe even 3 years ago, it's nothing what it was like today. And the question becomes, what makes us think that we can do this now in Cleveland? And I want to talk to you about 3 things that are relevant to all of you in this room for opportunities in the United States. First, in the tax plan that just happened that Donald Trump passed in December of last year, there was something that Sean Parker kind of stuck in the legislation. And what he did was created something called opportunity zones. Yes, that's Sean Parker. You know, Sean Parker, that guy? Yeah, Sean Parker. And what this is if you're an American citizen who makes an investment in a company and sold it, you have something called capital gains. So you have about a 25% tax on that gain. Rather than writing a check to the U.S. government for that amount of money, you can invest it in a company or real estate in Cleveland instead of writing the check to the government. And whatever appreciation you have on that asset or investment, as long as you keep it for at least 10 years, is completely tax-free. It's a huge, huge deal. The idea was how do we catalyze cities like Cleveland in tax? So that's going to bring billions of dollars in investment. And it doesn't have to happen if you live in Cleveland. You can live in New York, Tennessee, you can live in Miami, wherever you are, and invest in a company in Cleveland, and that opportunity zone will be there. So that the rules just came out a week ago. So this is brand new. And people can also invest in funds that make those kinds of investments. So that's number one. It's just an enormous amount of money, as it says up there, unprecedented amount of money coming in. Secondly, obviously, all of you are very, very familiar with blockchain. Personally, like a lot of you, I believe this is an incredibly transformative technology. There's a lot of hype certainly around it. There's a lot of misinformation certainly around it. But we believe deeply that blockchain has that power to transform the digital economy. iAngels calls it frontier technology, so I'm hijacking their words. So by focusing on blockchain now, early, we can get a head start. So I'm going to give you some examples. Our public our transit system will accept Bitcoin. Our city will accept Bitcoin for parking tickets. Businesses throughout Cleveland will accept cryptocurrency. My car dealership, we sold an Aston Martin and 2 Porsches last week with cryptocurrency. So we want to create a use where people are very, very familiar with cryptocurrency in Cleveland and create that environment. The third thing is the cities, much like Tel Aviv, San Francisco, Boston, and New York have become very, very expensive. Cleveland has a very high level of sophistication. We have the 2nd best arts district in the United States behind Broadway in Cleveland, the #1 orchestra, the #1 art museum, an incredible restaurant scene, a great club scene, and yet you can rent space like this for $4 a foot. You can get a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,500 a month. A giant mansion on the lake is $800,000, and a normal house is $200,000. All things that probably seem foreign to you coming from a high-cost city like Tel Aviv. And what that means is for a startup, for you to bring a U.S. operation to Cleveland, it's going to be very, very inexpensive compared to those other cities. So that's what the Blockland effort's all about. We have about 1,500 people engaged in the effort. We have 10 pieces of the puzzle that we're putting together. Elad mentioned entrepreneurial environment. He's co-chairing that with a startup incubator that we have in Cleveland. I want to hire somebody from that startup incubator and have them live in Tel Aviv so that they would be here to understand what startups would come and what companies we can do seed capital investing in so that we create a bridge between Tel Aviv and Cleveland. Let me just pause and give a 30-second outline of why Cleveland for Tel Aviv. We have an incredibly vibrant Jewish community in Cleveland. The county is about 1 million people. The whole metro is about 2.7. We have 90,000 Jewish people in our county, so about 10% of the population is Jewish. That heritage goes back 100+ years. That started the manufacturing and trade. So we think that if you came to Cleveland, you would feel at home. And I think that's really, really important to making this effort work. So those are the 10 nodes. I won't go into great detail, but let me just flash through a couple things that I think are relevant. We partnered with the Blockchain Research Institute in Toronto. Strategically, we want a triangle between Tel Aviv, Toronto, and Cleveland. So Tel Aviv is what you're doing, the infrastructure of blockchain, as Elad likes to say, you make the things that you need as opposed to the things that maybe are fun. So you make the infrastructure that makes technology work. The Blockchain Research Institute does great work in that area, and of course, Cleveland would be the entryway into the US market. So any company in Cleveland has access to this research at no charge. We also think it's very important that the government adopt blockchain. So by the time that our conference starts next month, Ohio will be the most advanced state in the United States for accepting blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies. So we want to get all the regulation out of the way and make it so that you can pave the way to come to Ohio, and obviously Cleveland specifically. We're working really hard on that, and that should be up and running hopefully in the next month. Let me just flip through a couple of these. This is an amazing place here. We want to create the world's largest technology hub in Cleveland, 400,000 square feet, where for $150 you could have a desk for a startup. You'd have the high-tech innovation centers for companies. We'd have all the venture funds would be there, and it would be a horizontal place so that people who are doing different cool things would meet, and that should be up and running by next summer. We're creating a partnership also. We want to create a partnership also with the research centers here, Tel Aviv University, with our research center in Cleveland, which is called Case Western Reserve University. We think we can make that happen, grow our talent. And then last but not least, we have this conference coming up December 1st and 2nd for developers, an intense developer workshop on Saturday and Sunday, and an amazing conference on Monday and Tuesday. Thanks to Elad and iAngels, we're going to bring a big contingency of Israeli startups. A lot of you I hope to see there in Cleveland. We will make it an absolutely unbelievable trip, an unbelievable conference for all of you. So that's the full Blackland effort. I want to thank all of you for the amazing hospitality, for the companies that we've met. One is more impressive than the other. And again, like I started at the beginning, you guys are doing some pretty amazing things here in Tel Aviv. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you again for the hospitality.
Thank you, thank you. So I think it really, thank you. I think it really set the scene for some of the topics that we want to discuss here today, because I think the way that we look at it, Tel Aviv has been investing a lot in developing this blockchain ecosystem, and it goes really way back when companies and gatherings were not in conference halls such as this, but were really in like basements and very kind of under the radar locations. So we have come a long way, and I want to discuss a little bit about elements that I believe are key in building blockchain ecosystems. And we'll start with kind of like talking about kind of like an educational element, because the way that we see it, blockchain technology has been making the waves to become one of the most disruptive and innovative and pivotal technology shifts in the world. However, we still see how 10 years after the first white paper of Bitcoin, still adoption is relatively low. And it comes from a fundamental layer of consumers and retail consumers, and goes all the way up to institutionals, and we'll touch more as we go on this evening to discuss some of those issues. But I want to begin with really that basic layer about how do we and what do we do to take care of that educational element. Now, I want to start with you, Asaf, because in CoinMama, what I find really interesting is that kind of user journey that people can come that have very limited experience, of never engage in buying Bitcoin or buying any cryptocurrencies in their life, and they're coming to you as a destination for kind of like that first step in the journey. And you have a very important role in educating them on how to do that exactly. So share with me a little bit from your experience about how you see that educational journey of the user, and what do they do after they already know what they're doing.
So hey, I'm Asaf from CoinMama. And as you suggested, our vision is to simplify crypto for the masses. There's plenty of crypto exchanges out there, but I think there's a lack of platforms that provide this really crisp, easy, fast experience for people who are making their first steps. That's exactly what we set out to do. So I'm sure if you go back to the first time you purchased cryptocurrency, if you purchased cryptocurrency, if not, go to
How many
coinmama.com.
how many people here have already gone through that process? Actually, not too many. I'm surprised.
Surprise! So great. No, I'm joking. Look,
Half price now.
so half price. I wish. So the whole point of CoinMama is to hold your hand. You know, if you haven't done that, the first time you do it, you know, it's a fairly intimidating experience. It's overwhelming. You know, I'm seeing, you know, people who I find highly intelligent. You know, they just can't find their way around. You know, what's the difference between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and what are all those wallets, and what goes into which wallet, and what happens, you know, if I send it to the wrong wallet, you know, I lose all my money. It's a scary thing, and you know, we're talking about sometimes, you know, significant amounts of money. And the whole point of CoinMama is to hold your hand through those first steps and educate you, and we make it sort of part of our culture to go out of our way, you know, to support our customers. And you know, people they come to us, they don't have a wallet, so we don't offer a wallet, but we help them with opening a wallet with our competitors, and you know, and then they, you know, buy crypto. Collaborators, yeah, helping us in educating the market. But I think we can all agree that the user experience of crypto is broken to the bone, and you know, it's time for this to be reinvented, and that's exactly what we're busy doing.
I think it's very interesting, and there's actually alternative models. There are models where you really don't have to necessarily download or keep the wallet yourself. There are models such as eToro. I think it's a completely different platform, not really geared towards kind of like the first beginner step. So share with us, what do you think is the right kind of a journey for people who want to do fiat to fiat, or people who want to start trading but don't know where to go?
Sure. So at eToro, our view is crypto is a super interesting asset class, but it's a part of your investment portfolio. So in eToro, you could actually trade stocks, commodities, indices, and cryptocurrencies either directly or as copying other people, which is portfolio management. So we believe that it should be as easy as buying stocks and investing in stocks, and obviously support an entire platform. We are launching now our wallet, so we can give you the wallet to bring CoinMama users as well. But I think there are different, especially when you talk about education, I think the hardcore crypto community who are really interested in sort of owning their keys and understanding how addresses work and send it to one another, and being able to invest directly into ICOs, into the smart contracts, are a very important part of the ecosystem. But by definition, that's not the mass market adoption. So I think it's critical, because these people, the hardcore crypto community, are eventually the people setting up companies or joining companies and sort of building products. And they also understand the barriers for mass adoption, and therefore enabling us to build better products for more users.
Great. So it's also, I think, maybe part of the problem. It's kind of like this blockchain community. They're building the products, they're investing in other tokens, they're all kind of like bundled up within themselves. And I think, something that I would love to touch on is your university, and how you kind of like educating the next generation and leaders in the blockchain space. So you really took an initiative to educate engineers and better train people who want to cater to the space. And I think with that, obviously there's another element of education, not only for users, but for people who can find work or better engage with a blockchain ecosystem. So share with me a little bit, Dr. Granot.
There's a couple of issues that have to do with this directly. One is the general acceptance and mass adoption of blockchain in all its forms beyond just crypto. In fact, and I don't mean to diminish the importance of crypto, and I think it's an important first step, but when you look at the mass adoption of blockchain technology, it's not even in its infancy. It's a fraction of what we all think it will be. And in fact, what we're doing in Cleveland is we're trying to look at government and business applications. And so what we're solving and what we're trying to solve in the financial side of things, and whether it's in tokenization and other mass application of blockchain, is really something that we're looking forward to extending to the next level. In order for us to do that, I hope I'm not going to hurt anyone's feelings, we need to take it out of beyond just the geeks and the folks who are heavily into this technology, because that's where it's going to go. So the fact that it's been out for 10 years and it's still not even close to where we all think it can go is the challenge. Now, the other issue is higher ed is not really a change-embracing industry. Higher ed has been the same for 1,000 years. And so getting a university to embrace the technology, to train its students and its graduates on a variety of disciplines, not just engineers, but specifically in business, about the applications, the potential. You don't really need to understand the nuts and bolts. You need to understand what you would like the technology to do.
Is it
And
part of the actual curriculum, by the way, the formal one, the university?
Yes, and so and it starts actually in the business school, primarily because, like many things, you need somebody to actually say, let's do this. And so in that case, it was me. And so let's do this. It's nice to be the dean because you can actually tell people what to do. They don't necessarily do that in higher ed because they have tenure, but that's a whole other story. But in all seriousness, it is something that has to be driven. And when Bernie and I talked about Blockland initially, we said, one of the reasons Tel Aviv is so successful and the Israeli ecosystem is so successful is that higher ed here is actually very innovative, and a lot of the innovation comes from within.
So it's interesting. You feel that a lot of the education actually comes from the higher ed. But I think a lot of the entrepreneurs in Israel actually already start receiving that education way earlier in the military. So this is something that also kind of like distinguishes between the Israeli ecosystem and other ecosystems in the world, that people start at a very young age getting exposed to groundbreaking technology, encryption, security, things that, most peers of the same age in different places in the world don't really get exposed to until maybe after higher ed. Now, Lior, you had the opportunity to really work for the Prime Minister's office and work with groundbreaking technologies and security innovation at a very, very young age. Can you maybe share with us what does that mean to you when you compare that and you hold also higher degrees? So you did both. You had that kind of experience earlier on, but you also had formal higher ed. So where do you think most of the talent or the innovation in early education for the entrepreneurial landscape come from?
Right, so Lior, CEO of Puzzle. I wasn't a soldier at the A200 unit, but as Mor said, I used to work at the Prime Minister office, the cybersecurity division. So I can share with you my personal experience, which is very much like servicing at the technology units, the Army. In my opinion, there is a huge difference between what you can gain at the university, which is very much theoretical skills, compared to the practical skills you gain at the Prime Minister office or at the Army. I think that at the university you learn how to study, you learn how to ask questions, you learn how to research, and you learn actually how to improve your theoretical skills. But at the Army, especially in the Israeli Army, which is all the time under endless threats, the soldiers must to develop, to practical, innovate and create new things, because we always must be a few steps ahead before our enemies. So it's very important. So take that, combine with a huge budget that the government assigned for such important missions, and you get the best developers, the best entrepreneur, at least in my opinion. So I think that such army education that people getting here is the thing that create the Israeli people that disrupting technologies such as the blockchain technology.
Makes sense. So want to reiterate back to Bernie, because you touched on something early in your presentation about how Cleveland is becoming very open and receptive to accept cryptocurrency in everyday life applications, in buying different types of services, or even, I think you said coffee or something like really, really basic like that. So maybe adoption is coming from that kind of introduction of technology. So it's kind of like if you build it, they'll come. Like if I'll allow it, more people want to hold those crypto assets in order to just have a easier way of life. And maybe this is a way that Cleveland is actually helping to educate kind of like the lower level of population and teaching them about how they can keep their own cryptocurrency.
No, absolutely. And I think that's what, I think one of the I forgot which meetings. We had 19 meetings in the last 2 days. So I don't know which one it was, but somebody talked about the difference between the apps happen first or does the infrastructure happen first. I think maybe that was you. And I think you're right, which is the apps have to happen first. You have to have that demand. So I'll give you a little, for instance, of I think what has to happen is people are very comfortable with the status quo. That's usually the barrier to adoption, especially big companies. So when we made the decision to accept cryptocurrency at my dealerships, I was thinking, hey, I'm just going to do it because it's going to be kind of cool. But I don't know that it's really going to solve a problem. But last week, we had a client that wanted to pay for his Aston Martin. He wanted his wife to come pick it up, but he's in China. It would have probably taken 3 days to get him to be able to wire that money, being in China, to Cleveland. And he's so frustrated. We're so frustrated. The time back and forth. His wife, I'm sure, is yelling at him, saying, "Where's my damn Aston Martin?" And finally, he said, "Wait a second. You guys take cryptocurrency?" He says, "Yeah." 5 minutes later, deal was done. So those kinds of things, where 5 minutes, okay, exaggeration. I don't think it guys took 35 minutes. See, I worry about the Prime Minister office people. They probably already knew this happened. But the idea was it was easy to solve a problem that I didn't know existed. So I think the more you get mass adoption like that is where you can have the infrastructure, and then you can then do other assets like what Elad was talking about with whether it's properties or receivables, other financial instruments, car titles, et cetera.
Yeah. So I think it's really important. This is one element of how we can create a bit better adoption is really catering to the kind of like that lower end of the spectrum, but there's also kind of like that higher end that I want to start talking about right now. Because I think if we look at kind of like the bull market of 2017 and everything that has happened, most of that maybe was a result of lack of education in the space or more speculators who are coming into the space. But now, after everything is kind of cooled off a little bit and people are taking a step back and re-observing how to reinsert themselves into the ecosystem, I think it's time for kind of like those giants to come in, and everybody's talking about the new wave or the next wave of institutional money coming in or larger institutions, looking at regulation and looking at a more structured approach to kind of like re-enter the blockchain ecosystem. So back to your point, Bernie, so this is kind of like about how we can bring the masses to adopt this technology and to better educate them about how to use the technology. But what about the major challenges to actually bring institutional money or larger institutions involved with crypto assets? And what do you think, or how do you think Blockland can attract institutions in terms of capital, but also knowledge sharing and building the kind of infrastructure for the future?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. The more mass adoption you get, people are going to ask the questions. They're going to go to the bank and say, "Why don't you allow me to do this cryptocurrency when that's what I want to do?" And I think young people are going to drive that. I think young people are going to be much more interested in being involved in cryptocurrency than maybe older people are. And I think as banks realize that, companies are very good at being able to find out where their clients are going. If their clients are going in a certain direction, they're going to go in that direction as well. So I think at least our approach in Cleveland is create the ecosystem for mass adoption quickly from the ground up.
From the ground up.
And because if you talk to a bank, they're going to see it as a threat, and the ones who do will lose, ironically. The ones who see it as an opportunity and jump in first are the ones that are going to win. It's just a matter of convincing them to do that. But I think the mass adoption below is important.
I feel like saying that if they wait for their user base to actually ask for it, they're probably too late in the game. Yoni, can you share with us, because eToro is a company that is actually partnering with other large organizations in the world in the space, and they've actually also received capital investment from some of the largest, more significant financial institutions in the world, like banks and so on and so forth. Do you find them eager to innovate or quick to make decisions in the space, or do they just view their investment in eToro as their bet on crypto?
So first of all, financial institutions, especially large financial institutions, are not fast in doing anything. They're usually very slow, they're very risk averse, and mostly sort of controlled by risk management, compliance, lots of lawyers and accountants. So generally, I don't think we're going to see very fast banks adopting crypto as crypto. They're all interested in blockchain technology. They're all interested in generating returns, which is why they're investing in companies in the space, which is great. So we encourage them to invest in companies in the space, in our case, in us. But I don't think they're going to get into the space, and generally, I think we should actually discourage them from getting into the space, because it actually enables a lot of the growth and innovation that a lot of the startups are seeing, is the fact that you cannot go to your bank and try and buy either Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency or invest in a smart contract in an ICO. The fact that they can't do it actually sort of
Presents
is
an
growing
opportunity.
the entire space of startups and innovation. So I actually think it's a good market cycle.
It's a blessing. Okay, Asaf.
Eventually they'll come in and use services like Lior's Puzzle, but it'll take time.
Great. So, Asaf, tell us a little bit, because I know you guys are also considering and looking at B2B approaches, and how can you take your technology and create partnerships with larger organizations. So share with us a little bit about that.
So, CoinMama is basically sort of a fiat to crypto on-ramp and soon an off-ramp as well. And we're seeing a lot of interest from both traditional sort of investment houses, so not banks yet, and I don't know when, but hopefully not in the near future. So traditional investment houses that had nothing to do with crypto, but they have significant user bases. These guys understand that there's an opportunity. The genie's out of the bottle and it's not going back. And we're seeing such fairly large companies from all over the world wanting to join forces with someone who's been doing that for a while instead of reinventing the wheel. So we see a big opportunity in that space. And I truly think that in order for the institutionals to come in, regulation has to set in. We need a lot more clarity, all of us, from the regulators, but we need a lot more adoption. And adoption up until now, crypto has basically been speculation, and that's fine. A lot of people have made a lot of money out of speculation, but I think we actually need to see usage of the coins, and all those utility coins. There's very little usage in the real world. We're actually launching an initiative now. There's Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So, we're launching an initiative called Crypto Sunday. In that weekend, trying to promote and, increase adoption for cryptocurrency. So, there's a lot of businesses, including some of the biggest brands in the world, that accept crypto as a means of payment. And, we're teaming up with those brands and influencers to promote and make sure there's more adoption.
So I think, one element of one reason that institutionals are taking their time is they're too big to actually move fast enough, but also I think they're just scared. Every day still, exchanges get hacked. People are not exactly sure how to keep their tokens safe, and this is where I want to turn to you, Lior. Share with us a little bit about Puzzle, because essentially you're building the safest crypto storage solution for institutions. And these days, where some of the biggest institutions are talking about keeping a position in Bitcoin or in other kind of like more substantial or legacy tokens, they're really thinking twice about how to keep that safe, because at the end of the day, that's really what sets banks or these large institutions apart. So share with me a little bit about your approach.
All right, so I want to start with a question. Do you know how much money was stolen since the beginning of this year in cryptocurrencies? Anyone? All
Let's
right,
run a show of hands.
Yeah, so it's more than $1 billion. Hacking events are reported weekly, and this is a huge problem. So that's why institutions scared to enter this market, who wouldn't be scared. I can tell you from my personal experience that I met with some big players at the market who holds a lot of money, And unfortunately, I found out that most of them don't really have the necessary knowledge in the security of the blockchain. And in fact, all of the existing solution proved to be hacked. Even me and my team hacked the most popular one ourselves. So I think that the blockchain technology is great, is interesting. There are so many usages, but there is a huge barrier about the security aspect. And I think that once this barrier will be solved, the market will grow and a lot of institutions will enter the market as well. That's actually one of Puzzle's mission, and I'm very passionate about solving this issue.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, and I think the last thing is that I mentioned earlier is really for large enterprises that they wait kind of like on the sideline to see what course of action the regulator is going to choose, because I think they trust that they have to work in line with the regulation that is just now forming. And I want to ask Yoni, because I know you are very involved and you know about regulation in different places in the world. At the end of the day, you know, this technology is really something that enabled people to come from different places in the world and work in collaboration, regardless of where they're coming from. And now we're seeing, you know, each different regulator taking their own approach about how to adopt the technology, or what is the best mean to actually work and navigate in the space. So what do you think is going to happen with the regulatory environment?
So first of all, we generally see a very positive sentiment towards sort of regulating, but light touch regulation from the US, which I think is awesome. So sort of a do no harm approach like in the internet. And that's super important in order to keep innovation going. Then we see others who are a bit more rigid around regulation, but actually enable businesses to flourish, like Japan and South Korea. Japan more, South Korea a bit less. And then the rest is a bit vague right now. In Europe, you have Malta and Gibraltar, both trying to sort of lead a path towards regulation. And I think eventually the biggest risk, there's two very big risks in crypto. One is for a technology risk. So quantum computer, somebody broke the mining algorithm and you're fucked. Because in theory, Bitcoin could go to zero within 3 seconds.
Is that technical?
Yeah, that's technical.
term.
So a quantum computer could, in theory, you know, break the system. That's a very big problem. Pardon my French. And the second is political regulation risk. Like Donald Trump can tweet one day, I decided that Bitcoin is illegal. I'm going to do something about it. Stop buying Bitcoin. Stop it. It's horrible. And that's also a very big problem unless there's already regulation around it. I mean, nobody expects Trump to say that regarding stocks in Wall Street. But it might just happen, because it happened in places like China and Russia, and everybody's waiting to see sort of someone legitimizing the space. Right now it's companies, so Fidelity going to the space is great. A lot of things coming from the SEC commissioners is great, but people are waiting to see that somebody legitimizes the space officially.
Okay, so according to Deloitte Global Blockchain Survey, the #1 reason why companies refrain from investing in blockchain is actually regulation. And I want to ask Elad. I know there are many, you know, university endowments, pockets of money. Are these the kind of investors that are going to shy away from investing in the space? They're going to wait for regulation? How do you observe kind of like the risks of going into the space and becoming active investors?
Regulation is a function of the society that it's a part of. And I think Bernie was talking about a bottom-up approach. And I think in this case, it really is a race to regulation. When you can talk about the states, and you look at Ohio being on the forefront, really with so much legislation that's ahead of everyone else, there's an effort to legitimize, as you call it. There's an effort to mass scale that has to be grounded in regulation and legislation, which really go hand in hand. And so there is a very liberal attitude of accepting new things, and I don't think the president is going to rule it out anytime soon. Quite the contrary. But again, I think one of the most important things is for this to go beyond the cryptocurrencies and to go into other things. So regulation and legislation will legitimize multiple uses and multiple cross-disciplinary uses that will be very attractive to university endowments and other institutional investors, because otherwise they are the most risk-averse, as you know.
Yeah.
They will absolutely, pension funds will not get into any of this game before it's 100% secure. And so that's the bottom-up sort of attitude that really we feel Ohio is way ahead of the game.
Yeah. I want to take one more question, and then I'll want to open up for a short Q&A. Lior, so custody and regulation are really intertwined. I find that regulation or lack of regulation can really affect your business model. Do you want to share with us what are your thoughts about that?
All right, so first of all, the regulation is great. It makes people to believe in cryptocurrencies. It makes people feel more comfortable about the blockchain. I will speak about custodians. Today, the regulation doesn't push customers to use custodians in order to hold their assets, but maybe one day they will. So at the moment, our business model is to licensing our technology to our customers so they can hold their own assets by themselves. But yeah, as I said, maybe one day the custodian will be a must. At that point, what we think that we are going to do is partnership with some custodians in order to combine our technology with the traditional custodians, which is something that can be fitting to the regulation as well.
Excellent.
That's the plan.
Thank you. So I want to take 3 questions because we are really short of time. Yes?
So you've spoken about mass adoption of crypto and how it's really been held back. And none of you have spoken about what seems to be the elephant in the room, in the 2 big elephants of the tech space, which most normal mainstream people rely on, Google and Facebook, have banned the ads of the whole crypto industry. I'm interested in your perspective of how it's affected your businesses, that ban, the inability to advertise to regular people who use Facebook and Google and who aren't in the crypto bubble like us.
No one's to take it.
So we advertise quite a bit both on Google and Facebook. First of all, the ban is over, which is important to note. The ban is partially over. They just moved into whitelisting mode. So basically, companies now can apply and say, here's where we have the licenses, here's how we work.
But you have to have licenses, and most crypto don't. You obviously do.
Right. Especially great. So only we can advertise. Okay. But that is great. But the point is, they had a problem of liability. So what happened is, and it's something the ecosystem needs to remember, the amount of scams and fraud in the industry was mind-blowing. Like, it took me a while to understand how much scam and fraud there is in the ecosystem, because I'm very optimistic. I'm like, I know a lot of people doing ICOs, they're all fine, it's all great. And I realized, wow, there's like 20% fraud and scam. Now, Facebook and Google and others didn't know whether they are liable to people promoting fraud and scam through their websites. And that's a very big question of liability, and I think that's why they had to stop. And I think doing whitelisting there does make sense in order to remove a lot of the fraud and the scam and make sure that companies do have some sort of regulation. I think that significantly hurt the business, but on a macro scale, I think it's all relevant to regulation. So if you think about what really hurt the space is sort of the death of the utility token narrative right now, which is just because of regulation and sort of, unknowns and uncertainty around what is the regulation. And despite the fact that this was the killer app of blockchain. You have Bitcoin, then you have ICOs. ICOs were the killer app of 2017, which led to basically all the cryptomania. But now it's almost impossible to do ICOs because you're uncertain who you can sell to. You can't sell to US people, you can't sell to Chinese people, you can't sell to Russian, you can sell to anyone. And I think
You can sell to anyone who doesn't have an extradition treaty with your country, which means
And that's where Google and Facebook ban you. But I think that's where we need clarity. We need to enable the innovation in this space. You need to enable smart contracts. It's a great innovation. You need legislation coming from places maybe like Ohio saying, you can build a company here and run smart contracts, and we'll get the official exemption from the SEC. Once you get that, we'll see sort of the second stage of crypto. Because right now, everybody is afraid. I think now there are more lawyers getting paid in the crypto space than developers,
Engineers.
and that's a problem.
Okay, second question. It'll be the last one, yeah?
Hi. It's more towards you guys, but everybody can chime in. What do you think it's going to take for companies to actually not adopt crypto, but blockchain in their back-end systems where the consumer never really needs to know if it's using blockchain or not, but it just essentially streamlines a company's back-end system, whatever field it might be in, insurtech, fintech, sales?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that's something that we work on a lot in Cleveland. I think the answer to the question is, it depends on the audience. Like, obviously today I'm talking differently than I would if I was sitting in front of a bunch of big company executives. I try to avoid the word blockchain because they think differently, right? They start thinking crypto, my son did it, I heard about my neighbor who lost his wallet, blah, blah, blah. And so what you talk to them about is, here's the things that you can do with this technology that you can't do today. And you need really elegant, simple proofs of concept. I think part of where we're going wrong as an industry in that area is that we're shooting for the moon, thinking we're going to have all medical records are going to be on blockchain. So I'm going to walk into, if I break my leg here in Tel Aviv, I'm going to walk into a hospital, give them a barcode, and it's going to have everything that happened to me from the moment I was born in Colombia, South America, to the 19 cities I've lived in, all in one barcode. That's not going to happen tomorrow. So we need simple, elegant proofs of concept that solve very, very elegant solutions. And I think from there, they start adopting the technology. That would be the path that I would encourage.
I want to bring us back full circle and go one by one with each panel member and ask you guys, what do you think is the one thing that Cleveland can learn from Israel and you guys would like to adopt? And what is the one thing that would make an Israeli company actually choose to go to Cleveland and set up shop there? Let's start with you, Bernie.
Well, after my 2 days here, I'm going to start something called the Governor's Office of Cybersecurity. It's going to be an elite force of people in the Governor's Office. No, I mean, quite frankly, the one thing that we're missing there is that this idea that when you're 18 to 21, you have to go to the military, and the amount of immersion that you get there and the amount of camaraderie that you build and the common purpose that you build is honestly very, very hard to replicate. Very, very hard to replicate. So what we can learn from that in Cleveland is, what are some ways that we can connect people who are in this space together to create kind of an artificial version of that? I'd say that's number one. In terms of attracting companies to Cleveland, the money will be there, the market will be there, and the support will be there. I think those are the three things that you need to be able to do this. The ecosystem will exist. So I'd say that's my answer to the second question.
Excellent. Elad.
What I think is critical, and we see that here, and you take it for granted, but we don't, is the involvement of women in technology. We don't have that ingrained into our DNA, and we should. And so it's our responsibility, since we don't have a compulsory military service or any type of national or state service, which is unfortunate, by the way. We do have a filtering system that goes into the universities, among other things. And certainly universities need to make more of an effort to recruit female students into entrepreneurial, engineering, STEM, and so on. So I think that's something that is higher education's responsibility, since there's no military service or anything similar to that, to do that, and I try to play a small role in that. In addition to what Bernie was saying about all of the conditions that we provide in Ohio, I think what it gives Israeli companies is a stepping stone, an entrance into the United States that is with much less friction and with a lot more advantages and certainly a lot less competitions than the usual places that we tend to see Israeli companies go to. Sure, some companies would do great on the East Coast and some would do great on the West Coast, but not every company. And so we provide another option of a very friendly, tech-friendly, Israeli-friendly, crypto and blockchain-friendly environment that would be attractive to some Israeli startups and companies.
Go.
I think the first thing that we're right now interested in when we're sort of setting up overseas, and we have offices in Australia and China and Europe and Gibraltar, and now setting up in Malta, and now in New Jersey as well, is regulatory framework and help. So Gibraltar and Malta are very effective in this space. They came to Israel. They brought a lot of people here to sort of help us understand that they'll be our promoters within the European Union to help the Israeli companies basically set up there. I think that's the most important things for Israelis to be able to sort of migrate not to the sort of standard San Francisco or New York, which are horribly expensive. Second is direct flights. I think those are the big things, because obviously all the rest is there, so cheaper labor and cheaper housing, etc. But the regulatory framework is really something where I think Israeli companies would need help in the US. It's a very complicated space, and it's really about an ecosystem and some government support.
So, as I told you earlier, I think for any blockchain company in Israel or abroad to come to Cleveland, just set them up with a bank account. Ideally, if there's some money in the bank account, that could help. But banking is obviously a challenge for most crypto companies. So, if there's a crypto-friendly bank in Cleveland, that can go a long way.
So blockchain companies will help us open wallets, but we really need a bank account, right?
Yeah.
Or pay everyone in crypto.
Also a way to do it.
So I think that, and continue to what I said before, in addition to the technology that the Israeli startups know to bring, I think that there is a very unique personality, and continue to what you said, to the fact that you are doing your army. And we're being through much difficult way of life until we were making it to the 20th age. And I think that's what makes the entrepreneur so special, and I think that's what can be great for a
Attract talent.
build an army. That's the first thing. But
Thank you, everyone. I would like to wrap up. We're all still here, so you guys can stick around and ask questions. Thank you, Bernie, Elad, Yoni, Asaf, Lior. Thank you guys for joining us today, this packed house. Join us for our next Blockchain Breakfast Club. Thank you, guys. Bye.